So we're going to move over to Florida District 16, and then we'll come back for closing remarks. All right, so our first candidate is Jason Fisher, who is a native of Jacksonville. After graduating from the University of North Florida with a bachelor's degree in electrical engineer, Mr. Fisher has worked for Florida Power and Light and as a civilian engineer in the United States Navy. He has spent 5 years supporting the global war on terrorism, and later he transitioned into serving as an engineer for the Naval Facilities Engineering Command, where he was responsible for energy policies and utility infrastructure at several Navy bases in the Southeast. In 2011, Jason went to work for CSX, where he has been responsible for negotiations of energy and utility contracts in over 20 states. Currently, Jason works for Eurotech? Okay, where he is in charge of business development, and he's here in the Jacksonville area. Jason is a member of the Mandarin Rotary, a member of the FBI Task Force on Security. He's a former board of directors of the Society of American Military Engineers. Say that slowly. And in 2012, Jason became the youngest person who was ever elected to the Duval County School Board. He and his wife, along with their young sons, live in the Mandarin area. Thank you, Jason, for being here. Our next candidate is Ken Organis. He is retired also from CSX after 32 years of service. He moved to Jacksonville in 1976 and has lived in District 16 for over 40 years. Together with his wife, Peggy, they have raised 2 children and are now proud grandparents. He is a graduate of the University of North Florida, where he received a bachelor's degree in literature and communications and a master's degree in information systems, and was an adjunct professor at Webster University in the 1990s. So thank you both for being here tonight. The first question goes to Jason. You have been critical of Duval County Public School System. What advice would you give to them to improve their scores, their spending, and their accountability?
Well, first I want to say thank you, Betsy and Tomas, for putting this forum on today. I think it's great for our republic. I think it's important to have public discussions about issues. So as an engineer, we're trained to think critically and identify issues, but also use data to drive solutions. And so anytime I've had a criticism, I've always offered up some things, and I'm glad to share those with you today. So I think the first thing that the Duval County School Board needs to do is have an external independent audit done of their finances. They had some recent financial trouble that they just kind of did an internal investigation on. It's kind of swept it under the rug. I think the next thing they need to do is do a zero-based budget, which is something that I led when I was on the school board in my first year. And we were able to invest more money in the classroom. And I think once they do their zero-based budget, they'll have a better understanding of where their money is, and they can find more ways to put money in the classroom. Get rid of some of their administrators, hire more teachers, focus on vocational programs like what was mentioned earlier, and then also get rid of the currently adopted Common Core aligned curriculum, toss that out, and find something better, because I know as a parent I'm not happy with the way some of this, particularly on the math side, is working out. It's turning kids away from math, and that's not good for our society.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, listen closely on this one, because this one's a little long. So recently, you retweeted a Florida Representative Jeb Brandy's tweet, which stated, "Florida's medical marijuana market is controlled by a small cartel of suppliers, while a surge in demand leads to high prices for sick Floridians. Next year, I will file legislation that puts patients first and will open the market to small businesses." So Jason, do you support such legislation, and what are your thoughts relating to this issue?
Thank you again. So I think I would need to see the particular legislation to say whether or not I would support it. What I would say first off is marijuana is still a Schedule I drug, which means it's still a federal crime for a lot of the things that people are already doing. So I think that needs to be addressed first. The other is it's a controlled substance. And so if it were to go into the public, we would need to make sure that the access was limited, that minors and drug addicts had a more difficult time getting access to it, but people who needed it, if there were medicinal purposes, could still get access to it. You know, the part of the reason why I retweeted that is because I voted against the recent implementing bill for that for a couple reasons. One, because it's still a federal crime, but two, because it did create a cartel. It created a few extremely wealthy people at the source of it. And so, as a market-driven person, I think we need to look at how do we not create a monopoly? How does government not create a monopoly? How do we make sure that there's innovation? How do we make sure that we're driving down costs? Because that's ultimately what will happen. You have a few people who get ridiculously wealthy. They'll control the system, and it ultimately won't be good for the public.
Thank you very much. All right. So, Mr. Ken, your first question.
Okay.
Following the school shooting in Parkland in February, Florida passed the Majority Stoneman Douglas School Safety Act. This was followed by a great deal of social action, which now seems to kind of have quieted down. What is your proposal to make our schools safer?
First, I want to echo the other candidates in thanking Tomas Jimenez, the Jimenez Law Firm, all the other sponsors for this great public forum where probably no other place in Jacksonville where you can see all the candidates at one time and get their opinions. This is great. I'm very concerned that with the 24-hour news cycle and with the political turmoil going on, that what happened at Parkland back in February is going to go into the dustbin of history like, unfortunately, some of the other mass shootings have done. It's our moral imperative as parents, as grandparents, that we cannot let this happen. I have a 3-point plan to make schools safer, and the first is to implement reasonable gun legislation that respects our Second Amendment rights. And the second is to make our schools safer places to learn, but also remaining inviting places to learn. And the third point I would like to make is that we need to do more to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people. And one of the other candidates mentioned mental health. Well, the fact that we're 49th in the country in mental health spending that rhetoric doesn't really hold water.
Okay, we're going to address this one in your next question.
Okay.
So let me just cut you off for a minute. We want to make sure that we're keeping track of time.
Okay.
So your second question, what do you think should be done to address the growing issues of uninsured and underinsured people in our communities with regard to health care? So if you would please address that health care question.
Well, the first thing we can do is there is a low-hanging fruit. And that low-hanging fruit is the Medicaid money that has been there for years for the taking. That would ensure millions of additional Floridians right there. And one of the greatest uses of Medicaid funds is mental health spending, which would also help with our gun violence problem here in the state. I would also say that if we have a change in leadership at the top of the state as well as in the legislature, then we can bring an Affordable Care Act exchange here in Florida. And I know with speaking with some of the members of the Latino community, affordable health care is a top issue.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.